You're listening to Discography Discussion, episode 135, Shai Hulud, with Bryan Patton of As the Story Grows.
Welcome to the next chapter of As the Story Grows.
Hosted by Dan Terry.
Comes in, has the kid in a really nice, hotel suite,
And Joseph Wren. When Bryan Patton calls, you answer the phone. Unless he calls on Skype, then you just answer the call.
These Shai Hulud albums aren't going to listen to themselves.
Presented by discussmetal.com. And if you think 6 Degrees of Borderlands leads back to David Lynch, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe. That is Dan. Bryan Patton is here from As the Story Grows.
What's up?
Everything about this band leads me back to Borderlands. The new game came out 2 days ago. The band is named after sandworms from Dune. David Lynch directed Dune. Beetlejuice is afraid of sandworms. I think that's an allegory for Beetlejuice being afraid of God, since the Shai Hulud are supposed to be the hand of God. I'm reading way too far into this. What's going on, Dan?
Hey, not too much, man. It's been a few days. My wife had a baby. A lot of people have asked me this week if I had a baby, and that's technically not correct. My wife had a baby, and it was very difficult. So I am joining you guys on the wonderful, wonderful voice app from my very own basement.
I think Bryan Patton is joining us in his basement.
Same tool, not a basement though. Living room.
Living room, office.
Yeah. Place where magic happens.
Magic being As the Story Grows podcast.
Yep, it happens right here.
Squad 5-0.
Squad 5-0, we're able to turn Daniel Terry onto Circleback, so that was a win.
Dude, Circleback.
You're welcome.
That band is great. It's funny. I scheduled to do an interview with John sometime this week.
Nice.
For my other podcast, and then my wife had the baby on Monday, so I'm like, it's probably not going to be this week, dude.
Probably not.
And I was like, but I love the record. I wish I was striking while the iron is hot, but I'm not. It's going to be a few weeks off. But no, dude, that Circleback record is killer. It's really to the point. It's not too long, and it just hits like that hard, that happy medium of hardcore that we had in the, I don't know, early 2000s, before metalcore kicked in. It was, the hardcore bands were really brutal, and it's not that they're not. I just haven't heard a band that sounded quite like that in a while.
Yeah, I agree. It's been years.
Kind of reminds me of Few Left Standing a little bit, if you remember that band.
Oh, yeah.
But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about another hardcore band that plays
Shai Hulud.
A different style than what we were talking about with Circleback, for sure. Shai Hulud's one of those bands that's kind of hard to talk about, because part of me wants to just be like, yeah, guys, it's all good. Check it out. Okay, good night. Roll credits.
Dan and I spent the last week listening to this band. He handed me his notes. I said, here are mine. We realized that if the two of us did the show by ourselves, it would be a 5-minute podcast about how you should just go listen to Shai Hulud. So we pulled the audible of, let's call Bryan Patton. He'll have things to say.
Oh, there's a lot to say about this band.
There definitely is. I mean, they've been around for basically forever, right? I mean, if 1995 is the beginning of forever.
Yeah.
I think this band is just so iconic with the scene. It's weird too, because I used to actually get them confused with Strong Arm a lot. If that's weird, because I mean, you can't really confuse the names, but with their earlier material, I would hear Shai Hulud song and be like, oh, is this Strong Arm? And then I'd be listening to a Strong Arm song and I'd be like, oh yeah, this is Shai Hulud, right? They were kind of they were similar bands at the beginning, I guess is where I'm going with that. And they were kind of the only two bands that I remember that sounded this good playing hardcore, because there were some melodic hardcore bands, but it was almost so melodic you couldn't even call it hardcore, whereas these guys kept it heavy but added so much more grandiose melody they were doing, and just real heartfelt emotion, whereas I think a lot of hardcore bands at the time were still just kind of trying to come off as hard as nails or something like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an easy mix-up to make, since both bands shared drummers, and
yeah,
so that sound migrated.
Yeah, it definitely did. So, Joe, do we have anything before we jump into this? Do we have any feedback or
We had a comment on episode 133, Hope for the Dying. Star Kill Sam says, Aletheia is amazing. Really enjoyed this band. I'm impressed by the variety of bands covered on the podcast. Once I saw Living Sacrifice, Zao, Opeth, and etc. being covered, I knew I was in for one very satisfying podcast. Thank you guys for being so fun to listen to.
Well, that's awesome. I definitely appreciate that, and that people are going back and checking out the old episodes.
Well, I definitely want to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, then you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, so if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening. And now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
I like 5-star reviews, okay? I actually have one to read for you guys tonight if you have time. This was on Apple Podcasts, was just posted on Tuesday by It's Keebs. Just found this podcast today when I was listening to the Brutally Speaking podcast. It's also another podcast you guys should check out. I couldn't be any more happy with this gem of a podcast. Funny guys talking about amazing music. What's not to love? Keep doing what you're doing. 5 stars. P.S. I did this entire review in Ryan Clark's voice. Man, I should have read it in Ryan Clark's voice then.
Which one, the singing voice or the screaming voice?
I wouldn't even call it a screaming voice. I'd say it's more like a barking dog voice. But, your mileage may vary. I wish I had read it like that. But, oh, well. Appreciate that. And, in the past, we've really focused a lot on 5-star reviews and all that. As time's gone on, though, I'm starting to realize that the biggest thing that you can do to help our podcast out, besides just giving us money, and there actually are people that do that, which is fantastic, but the best thing that you can do for podcasts is share. Share the episodes on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. And I know the Instagram's been kind of dead. I'm going to get on top of that and start actually posting stuff on Instagram. I'm an old guy, so it's hard for me to remember that there's like 3 major players now in the social media realm. But one major player that I really want to focus on right now is Discord. We have a Discord server up. There's a link to it in our show notes. I'll repeat this later on at the end of the podcast, but we have a group of dedicated people on Discord that are posting day in and day out, all night. I mean, I actually ended up having to turn the notifications off on my phone because it was getting so out of control. But I love talking to those guys on there. And if you guys want to join in the discussion, find out stuff about the show, find out what we're listening to. We've got memes, we've got jokes, we've got insider information on the show that you're not going to hear anywhere else. So definitely check us out on Discord. And that is probably the coolest way that you can interact with us and just find out what's going on with us, and we can find out what's going on with you.
And now Bryan is going to tell us all about As the Story Grows.
As the story grows, we're just chugging along here, talking to cool people, letting you know your favorite musicians aren't dicks and assholes. Yeah, it's my job.
I mean, some of them are, right?
Not that I've met. The ones who don't come on the show are.
Yeah, right.
There you go. So.
Perfect. He's underselling it. As the Story Grows is one of the best interview podcasts out there for you guys learning, just learning. I mean, literally, as cheesy as it sounds, what the story is behind a lot of the questions that you probably had listening to bands as they progress in their career. Sometimes they just disappear for long gaps of time and nobody knows why, or they go in a completely different musical direction than you're expecting and nobody knows why. And this is kind of one of the only podcasts. It's one of the only podcasts where you can actually kind of find out the real answers to those questions. So for that, sir, we applaud you.
Thank you. I hope I'm getting real answers. I think so.
You're getting falsified answers. It's the best. It's the answers that they provide you, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So Dan, tell me about Shai Hulud.
Oh man, Shai Hulud. One of the greatest melodic hardcore bands out there, but you're probably wanting like history, right? It's funny too because I call them melodic hardcore, whereas most people would categorize them as a metalcore, which I think is actually a very accurate description for like 1995 through 2000. But now we live in a different world where if you say metalcore, people get a little bit triggered, and they don't want to listen. They don't want to listen to it because they're expecting it to sound a certain way. This doesn't sound like metalcore as metalcore is today. This is literally what it sounds like, a passionate combination of metal and hard, like metal riffing mixed with hardcore aesthetics, I guess. And what you get is a pretty enjoyable experience. The band started off in 1995, and they were from Florida originally and ended up relocating to New York. And as Joe mentioned before, they are named after gigantic sandworms from Frank Herbert's novel Doom.
The hand of God, if you believe the Freeman.
I've actually never read Dune. I should probably stop everything I'm doing and go read that book, but I just haven't. It's not just a book either. It's a whole series, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the first time, and I'll make this a little bit more personal, but the first time I heard Shai Hulud was probably 2002, 2003, which would have been... because I remember I bought That Within Blood 3. I bought that like as a new release. So I've been with the band a while, but not as long as they have been around. And their first album, Hearts Once Nourished with Hope and Compassion, I mean, that's a mouthful.
Yeah.
1997.
This is honestly one of the greatest hardcore albums that I've heard. Like I definitely, and I hate to keep bringing up the strong arm comparison, but this album was really one of the only others that gave me the same feeling, like the same vibe that Strong Arm did. Whereas, I mean, Strong Arm was very religious, whereas Shai Hulud really wasn't, but they definitely shared a very similar sound musically. And I don't know, man. I love the riffs on this, and I love the screaming, which is a really simple thing to say, but for a lot of bands, for me personally, they'll do one cool thing that I like, and I'll kind of stick with them because of that. This album is like literally everything I like throughout an entire record. I think what really ties it together for me is not only great music, but the vocals are very impassioned. They're not tough guy at all, which is probably what separates me from a lot of people that like hardcore, is that I definitely like screamed vocals to be emotional and like still strong, like brutal or whatever, but like I like for them to have meaning behind them and be delivered passionately versus being delivered just to sound tough, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Right. And the thing that ties each record together is that Matt Fox, the guitarist, writes most of the lyrics, if not all of them. And so even though there have been member changes, the lyrics have this constant feeling that the same person is writing them, because it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, Strong Arm's Advent of a Miracle came out April 1997. Hearts Once Nourished came out in November 1997. So it was two bands from that Florida scene sharing the same drummer who just pounded you with these technical rhythms, these starts and stops in the drumming, and just like, yeah, that great melodic Florida hardcore sound.
It's just so good. I hate to, we don't ever say stuff like this on the show, on the podcast, but like, it's one of those things that like, if you don't know what we're talking about, or you don't have a point of reference for how this sounds, I can't really compare it to any other bands other than Strong Arm, because it's very unique, like you said, Brian, to like that Florida scene, in the late 90s. And I think it's really interesting too that the vocals are delivered as passionately as they are, considering the guy screaming them isn't the guy that wrote the lyrics, which is something that's going to continue throughout the rest of the discography. And it's something that I wouldn't have guessed unless I already knew that, because it's delivered in such a way that you just believe every single word that he's saying. And I think it was Chad Gilbert on this record. Chad
Gilbert from Newfound Glory.
Yep. Which is so funny.
As a hardcore vocalist.
It works though, and this is thankfully not the last we're going to hear from Chad. But this was for a debut. I mean, my God, like the band could have broke up after this, and it'd have been fine. Like we would have been like, yeah. Like I feel like Shai Hulud would still be considered one of the greatest hardcore bands ever if this was the only thing they did.
Yeah.
Like the only other band. Well, I'm not going to say it again. Yeah, Strong Arm did do that. But and they had an album out before Advent, but it was good, but it wasn't as good as Advent. But yeah, like this record is just crazy. And what's funny too is that I think literally right after this record came out, Chad Gilbert left the band and joined Newfound Glory.
Yeah, it was not long after that.
And if I'm not wrong, it wasn't he like 15 or something whenever they did this?
Yeah, he was very young.
Yeah. And it doesn't sound like it. And maybe it does a little bit. Like that could be where I'm getting that. Like, oh, it sounds so emotional and so passionately driven. Could be because it's a younger dude, that's maybe not necessarily like into hardcore tropes, as much. But yeah, like I focused a lot on the vocals because that to me is one of the most defining aspects. But like to not talk about the guitar work is doing it a huge disservice. This is, I used to think of it as kind of a Rubik's Cube. Like I think of a lot of music as like a puzzle that a band has to put together. And a lot of bands kind of fail at it. Like they create kind of a picture in your mind. But with Shai Hulud, the riffs are so technical and so melodic, and they just hit you in the feels in such a way that like it's like they've crafted together a perfect picture out of puzzle pieces with those riffs and those like with the riffs, the way the drumming, like I don't know, like it all just comes together really well. And I'm sorry if I'm not doing this justice, but it's just I'm such a huge fan of this band that it's really hard for me to objectively talk about them.
The style would be imitated for over a decade, into and out of the early 2000s. We've criticized bands that want to be under oath, who copy we have two guitars, we're going to do the Norma Jean thing or the Converge thing, where they're playing different things, and it creates this kind of chaotic back and forth. When the technicality comes in, that's what I'm hearing here in 1997. So who did it first? Was it Shai Hulud or was it Norma Jean?
Clearly it was Shai Hulud, but I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily compare it to that, but I think that this kind of music left an imprint. But like you say, there's a lot of imitators, and maybe that's true, but I've never heard anybody that's able to, like besides Strong Arm, like I've never heard any other bands really be able to come close to the way this sounds. I mean, like you can throw stuff like Hope's Fall in, but like that's a whole different set of influences, and like a totally different background. Whereas, I mean, they were like melodic and hardcore as well, but not quite like this. This blends kind of more of the old school hardcore into it. There's a lot more like straight ahead like punk rhythms and stuff that go on in these songs, and the transitions are kind of like they're not sloppy, but they just kind of transition immediately. And I think that this is just one of those bands where they had a vision like from the very beginning, and they followed it to a T, and they were doing something original. And if, like I said, if there were imitators, they didn't even come close. That's just like my opinion, man.
And it's that lyrical content that has to do with romantic relationships and angst and political themes that like hardcore bands were doing that. I mean, Earth Crisis was political as fucking anybody, but like not in the same way of like a poetic nature about it.
Yeah, they were poetic, and the music matched that same intensity. That's kind of hard to do. I mean, it really is. Like, because you can write like the best lyrics ever, but basically, and I used to say this all the time because I was a dickhead, but I would say that like I'm at the mercy of the musicians that agreed to show up. But in this case, you have the actual songwriter, you have the main songwriter writing all the lyrics too, and I think that's the important piece of the puzzle here, is that it's not necessarily the random event that a group of people get together that are all geniuses collectively. It's just that you've got a guy with a vision that's knocking it out of the park with all of his ideas, and he sticks to that vision. It doesn't vary from it, and in some cases that's a bad thing. See Mortification. But in this case, it was literally like the heart and soul of the band, and that's how a band is able to change members as much as they are between albums, but still maintain a consistent sound. So, speaking, are we ready to go into Tempered?
Yeah.
Okay.
That within Blood Ill-Tempered. 2003.
Did you? There was a 3. That Within Blood 3. That's weird because I didn't hear That Within Blood 1 or 2, but it's fine. So different vocalists on this album.
Different everything
except for Matt
Fox. And Steve Kleisett wrote all the drum parts for this record, which is why it feels similar to Hearts Once Nourished.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because this is like the perfect follow-up. Like it really is. Like I had literally, like, because like I said, I bought this as a new release, so this was the first Shai Hulud that I heard. And so whenever I went back to Hearts Once Nourished, I was like, oh my God. Like,
I found another one.
Now I've got, these are relatively short albums, so it's like now I've got like an hour and a half of Shai Hulud, and their albums get longer as they go, but it's so strange that you have almost a totally different band, but you have the same band. Nobody that went and saw this, nobody that went and saw this live, like saw a mixture of Hearts Once Nourished songs and these songs together, it had any kind of problem at all. And I think normally on the show we would say that, oh, that's a disservice, like, oh, they just released the same album again, and I really don't think that's it. I think that this album was a little bit more technical. It was a little bit more it was a little bit heavier, and that could have just been the sound like recording technology between 97 versus 2003. But what I love about this album is that it just kind of goes for the throat on being a little bit more like political, a little bit more like outspoken about issues. Not like as bad as Earth Crisis. I mean, the first time I was ever preached to at a show was not at a Christian rock show, but at an Earth Crisis show. But with Shai Hulud, it was I don't know, like someone's going to take over for me because I love this record, and I love and I think that they're fantastic. I don't know what
like
else?
Yeah, I mean as far as lyrics, you have like the Consummate Dragon to Tolkien reference, and you have songs about being a parent and raising your children, or an attack on lack of integrity in mainstream popular music, and more relationship songs. And it's a lot of just like dealing with wanting to be angry and fight all the time, but fighting against that to be a better person. Like, they were definitely trying to say something. Yeah, I mean, Gert's vocals sound nothing like Chad's.
Not at all. Yeah.
But musically, when you listen to the records back to back, it's obviously the same band. And maybe that just comes from condition where I just know like it's Shai Hulud and that's what I'm listening to.
Do you get the same effect from listening to Hope's Fall before and after Adam Morgan was in the band? It still sounds like Hope's Fall, it's just not the same feel.
As far as Adam as a drummer, I mean, they went through a whole musical change. Hope's Fall went through a whole musical change from post-hardcore, emo-core, whatever, to more space rock. This is a band changing members that's like trying to put out the same style of music and do the same thing. So it doesn't feel like an apples to apples comparison to me. But I mean, if you were to say Hope's Fall from Doug leaving to Jay taking over his vocals on Satellite Years, yeah, it would be kind of the same thing.
I think it's more of just like, oh my God, my whole band quit and I had to reassemble another band like on the fly because like we got stuff to do.
So we moved to New York to do it.
Moved to New York. Well, there's a lot of hardcore guys in New York, right?
Yeah.
But it makes sense. But I think it was more of just like reestablishing a status quo of like reassuring, people. And I don't know if this was like what he was thinking or not, but kind of just reassuring people that like, yeah, we're still the same band. You're still getting the same lyrical output. You're getting the technical riffing. You're getting melodic, heartfelt songs that really don't devolve into like there's no tricks with Shai Hulud. Like there's a lot of bands that like they can play hardcore, but in order to be melodic, they feel the need to resort to like super long, drawn out, atmospheric musical passages, or adding a bunch of clean singing into the albums. With Shai Hulud, it was always just like we're gonna always be a pure representation of what the original vision was, regardless of who's in the band. I mean, as long as Matt's still in the band, but like it's listen, I think that the two albums complement each other really well. And like, yeah, I don't think that the vocals sound anything like, I don't think that the vocals sound anything like they did on Hearts Once Nourished, but it's not a deal breaker for me. It still has that emotional delivery, and it still has the lyrics that I like. It has the music that I like. And so as a Shai Hulud fan, there was absolutely no misstep here. There was no, oh, they changed. And it wasn't like, it's immediately noticeable in a certain sense, but everything that you like about Hearts Once Nourished is on-tempered.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both more melodic album, and there's more, I think, metal influence in some of the guitar riffs.
Totally.
And then you have Steve's drumming, which just carries that same sound over. And if you compare it to what Steve was doing in Further Seems Forever at the time, I mean, it just makes a lot of sense when you compare him as a drummer from record to record. It's his sound that carries the band through those first two records.
Absolutely. And I think that the interesting thing about this record and the one before it is that Hearts Once Nourished is kind of positive. Like, the band has a very, like, I don't like to categorize bands by, like, worldview, but, like, the band has a very, like, humanistic, like, faith in humanity, but also no faith in humanity.
Right.
kind of vibe. You know what I mean? Like, and we'll get into that a little bit more on the next record, but, like, their demo was called A Profound Hatred of Man, and like they definitely have this love-hate relationship with humanity in general, which is what I find to be very fascinating about this band's lyrical output, is that, like, it's always just trying to, like, it's like two albums at this point of just trying to make sense of the world around you. Like, for the relationship songs, it's like, why would somebody treat me like this? Or why would I treat someone like this? And then you get into, like, why would people treat other human beings like this? Like, everything that they do is very much focused around this idea of, like, what the fuck is wrong with humanity?
Yeah.
And I love that, because I don't think a lot of other bands really explore it as sincerely as Shai Hulud does. And I say the band, but we're really just talking about Matt Fox,
Right.
But it's interesting. Like if there's somebody that I would love to sit down and have a 2-hour conversation with about, like, just worldview alone, like, that's the guy I want to talk to. So just hit me up, right?
danandjoeshow@gmail.com.
Yeah. Or I'll hit you up, or maybe you feel more comfortable talking to Bryan about it, but, like, it's it's definitely my favorite aspect of the band, like music aside, because I feel like there's so many bands out there that lyrically are so wrapped up in themselves that they don't really tackle those bigger issues. Because, like, even bands that are, like, super preachy, that are, like, hardcore about veganism or hardcore about Christianity or hardcore about, like, atheism, it's so tailored to how that specific person feels at that moment. And I would never change that. I mean, that's what makes hardcore so great. But, like, I feel like with Shai Hulud, it was kind of more of like let's take a step back and look at it as a whole. And that's what I respect the most about the band. And hey, the songs are cool too. Like, again, it's like literally in that pocket of a hardcore metal, but, like, with actual depth. Like, it's not heavy because, like, oh man, look at how heavy we are. And it's not melodic in that, like, look guys, we're still accessible. Like, your friends might like it too,
Yeah.
And that, I love it. I love it. And Bryan just sent me something that I'm going to listen to later. But
I wonder what that is.
Right. But it's definitely this record, if we want to get back to the record itself, it is undeniably, like, this band's straight vision. And I wouldn't call it a rehash of the last record at all. It's just a continuation of that. It's like The Empire Strikes Back, from Shai Hulud. Everything you loved about the first album is here, but they're going to kind of take the direction. They're going to go a little bit harder in everything that they do. So, like, the heaviness is heavier, the melodic side is more melodic. The lyrics are more introspective, and it's a great release. Like, I don't know why anybody listened to this podcast. Like, if you're not already a fan of Shai Hulud, like, why you would even listen? but like you should just be listening to these albums.
2008, Misanthropy Pure.
Oh, okay. So I sent Brian a text earlier, or a message earlier this week, and I was like, am I wrong if my favorite album is Misanthropy Pure? And he's like, yeah, you're wrong, but I mean, it's a great album. You know?
I get it. And I get why you, as a self-proclaimed meathead, get it and think that's your favorite one, because they definitely tone down some of the technical start-stop melodic aspects on this record and just punch you in the face from the moment you hit play on the record.
Dude, I would not survive for 8 seconds in this pit. Like, I'm a big guy. I'm pretty strong. I carried a 200-pound TV earlier. Like, I am. I'm all of that stuff. Oh my god, dude. Like, Venomspreader. It's a minute and 45 seconds of like porn.
Punch you in the face.
It's porn for me. Because so like to be totally transparent, like this does not sound like the previous two records at all. Okay, it does, but not really. And it's funny that you say that the technical aspects are toned down. I think this record's actually more technical, but it's more technical in like a metal sense. Like there's more like weird like melodic timey stuff. Like there's stuff in here that almost reminds me of Death, which is a weird comparison to throw out there, but like some of the stuff that they do, like on the song Misanthropy Pure, like that is just like, I don't know, like the lead guitar work on that is just like so, like makes me feel good, but is also like, oh yeah, man, that's metal. You know, like I don't know. It's definitely the first. It's definitely the most metal Shai Hulud album, and the vocals again, are different. And these vocals are more hardcore than anything that we've had before. Like they're more straight ahead, screams that aren't as emotional. Like it's more just like dudes up there just on the mic making statements.
Yeah.
More so than just be like, oh my god, this is how I feel. And I'll tell you, like this is the pace of some of these songs is just like completely neck breaking.
It's unrelenting.
It is. There's no like, okay, stop and take a breath. It just from Venomspreader all the way to Cold Lord Quietus, like, oh my god! Like we did a Patreon episode on this album a while back, and I think I went on for like 15 minutes about like how it was the greatest record in the entire world, and like it changed my life like forever or whatever. And again, I think again, it's just because I fall more on the metal side of things, and this was literally the most aggressive the band had ever been, without compromising their sound completely. You can still tell it's Shai Hulud, but like you're wondering like, oh my god, did somebody just rob this guy's house? Because that's what it feels like. This album, Misanthropy Pure, it is a profound hatred of mankind. Like it is, like everything I was saying, like about how like mankind is horrible. I hate mankind. Mankind is the worst. I hate all humans. But then in the song Misanthropy Pure, like he sings the lyrics like, I believe in man. I believe in man. Like that despite all of the horrible broken world that we live in, he still holds out hope that like man can persevere. And that is just like such a realization of everything they've been building to. Because like as we all get older, we get more bitter.
Yeah.
And this album is like the perfect representation of that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what else to say. This record hits from the moment you hit play, and it just keeps hitting. And yeah, it's more metal in its technicality. You lose the melodic, but it's definitely still Shai Hulud. I mean, the drumming definitely changes, which is, we talked about being consistent with the first two records, and losing Steve on this record. That's where that comes into play, because he has such a unique style as a drummer that you lose that on this record.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it would make sense with these songs, as they just pound you.
Totally. I mean, this is still like, if I'm having a bad day, this is going on, and I'm gonna come out of that again, having this kind of like, man, people suck, but not everybody. There are some people out there that can redeem all the people that suck, like that's what I think is so cool about Shai Hulud, is they are able to they're able to tackle these topics of humanity, but not really come at it from a judgmental perspective. Like, they don't really take any side. They don't take like a religious side, but they're also not like, hey, we're straight edge, you need to also be straight edge. You know, they're not like, we don't eat meat, you shouldn't eat meat either. Like, it's done in a way that I think everyone can appreciate. And it's kind of one of those, like, they say things about the world and about human nature that are very much like what everyone's thinking. And I think that's what makes this band have the longevity that they have, is that they are relatable to everybody on multiple sides of the fence.
Yeah, I mean, and the closing lyrics to the record, I was mindful, I have suffered, worth affection, capable of love, a vessel of hate and bitterness, leave your venom behind. And we all have such strength. I mean, like, for a record that's about how much mankind is awful.
Yeah.
Some powerful closing.
Yeah, but that's like some straight, and it's a great bookend, because you start with Venomspreader, and like, it just, can I just be a fanboy here and just say that, like, Venomspreader is like literally one of the greatest hardcore songs like ever made. Like, it is like so to the point. It's a minute 45, so it checks that box like perfectly, and it's heavy, it's unrelenting, and like, they could have gone full brutal here, like, they could have gone like almost death metal in their approach. But like, they're still Shai Hulud, so like, it's still like, even in the opening line, like in the opening like screams or whatever, it starts off and it's just like, it's still melodic. It's just like the weird thing about it, like it's like the most melodic you can be while still being like straight ahead, go for the throat, gut punch kind of sound.
Yeah.
I just can't get past it. Like, it just, I've been known to put the CD in and listen to Venomspreader like 4 times, like, and then continue with the rest of the album. And it's not even that the rest of the album's bad. It's fantastic, but it is a different Shai Hulud. And I could see people that loved the first 2 records being like, what is this? Because I even think that the cover artwork is a little bit more like generic hardcore than the previous 2. And so I think people might have been a little bit worried about like, well, what are we going to get here? Like, has Shai Hulud sold out and just become another hardcore band?
Yeah. Well, I think they were building up to that because Dave Quiggle did the album artwork for that record, and he did the artwork for the re-release of Hearts Once Nourished as well.
Oh, okay.
He actually just posted about that on Instagram today, which was funny. So,
I love Dave Quiggle's artwork for sure, but that could also be why I'm like, it's a little bit more generic, just because I've seen so many hardcore albums from Dave Quiggle, like
he is the man.
Yeah, actually, our I feel like, and I could be totally wrong about this, and he'll correct me, but our friend Buddy, who is on episodes every now and again, he lives in Tennessee, and I believe he's actually had interaction with Dave Quiggle. And if that's the case, I don't know why I haven't had him on the podcast yet. But that would definitely be a good, if anybody knows more about hardcore than us jokers, like that guy knows it. But yeah, like, so hands down, this is my favorite album by Shai Hulud. And like Brian said, I feel like they were always building up to this, like something like this was inevitably going to happen. And I think they just absolutely knocked it out of the park here. And it's just funny to see how long Shai Hulud has existed as a band, and how long it takes them to put records out. Like, like Hearts Once Nourished 97, Tempered was 2003, so that's 6 years, 6 more years to get to Misanthropy Pure, and then To Reach Beyond the Sun was 2013, so 5 years, like, that's a long time to wait for hardcore bands to typically put out like 1 album a year or something like that. But these are absolutely works of art, and like, I'm not saying it to be whatever, like, they're the greatest band in the entire world, but like, I actually do feel that way to a certain extent. So I'm just gonna leave that statement as it is.
2013, Reach Beyond the Sun.
Chad Gilbert's back.
Yeah. And he brought it.
This album too, right?
He did produce it as well, yeah. They actually brought back everybody. The original vocalist, Damien, Matt, who was the vocalist on Misanthropy, and here, they all were on the song Medicine to the Dead.
Yep.
So it's a big old family reunion.
I just want to listen to that song on repeat. It just, So like we talked on Misanthropy Pure about how like it was what they were building up to, like it was like inevitable. I feel like Reach Beyond the Sun takes a step back into the first two albums a little bit more, but it's also so modern for 2013 that it doesn't really sound like that. But I think that's what they were going for.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's not as unrelenting and pummeling and punishing as Misanthropy Pure, but it definitely feels more modern than the first two records. While having that vibe of just what makes Shai Hulud a great band.
I think it was what we as fans wanted.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I could listen to like 8 more Misanthropy Pures, but like, how long would it be before that got old? And I feel like this band, if there's a word that describes them, is just integrity. Like a band that is just stuck with what they have originally set out to do this long into the future, like almost 20 years. Like that's insane. Like to hear a band that put out an album in '97 still be putting records out to an extent where you feel like they are, I don't know. I'm trying to say a thing, but like it's for them to be this still like unapologetically Shai Hulud is incredible.
Yeah.
Well, there's just another word to describe it. It's just incredible. And I thought that this was perfectly fine. I don't love it as much as I love the first 3 albums, but it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be as great or whatever, because like there's a certain amount of like nostalgia that I have for the first 3 albums that no new album is ever going to reach. Like Joe and I in a little while are going to do a episode or do a Patreon episode on the new Korn album. And I'm going to say the same thing, that like, yeah, it's a new album and it's solid, but it doesn't ignite the same flame for me that the old albums do.
Yeah.
And that's probably just my fault.
Yeah. I mean, this album, like, it's probably the one I go back to least, but when I go back to it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is really good. I should listen to this more. Like each record scratches a different itch while being the same band and having a consistent sound throughout their discography.
This is more or less proof that the band can still get together and make music that sounds like this. It's not necessarily that they have something to say that we haven't already heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the way it's been with this band, is that it's always an expansion on what we've heard already. All the seeds are there, back on Once Nourished. Like they've always been that band. But what I think is the most interesting about it is that like how timeless kind of quote unquote their message is, and how we live in a totally different world than we lived in 1997. But this band is very much like, we're still trying to make sense of it just like the rest of anybody else is. But I think that there's a little bit more cynicism in this record than we had in the first 2. And that's to be expected just due to the age of the band members.
Age makes you cynical? No way.
What? No. I'd never make a claim like that, especially not on a podcast. I definitely feel like this band, like, they could put a record out. I mean, it's only been, it's been 6 years, so, we probably need a new album soon, and I'm probably going to love it just as much as I've loved these 4. Like, there's not a whole lot of bands out there that I have no doubt that I'm going to love their stuff. Like, Hopes Fall's the only other one that comes to mind. Like, they're not going to ever do anything that's going to piss me off. And I definitely feel that way about Shai Hulud. Like, they are a band that almost exists outside of time.
Yeah.
And outside of genre,
Yeah, I mean, Matt Fox is currently making music with Zombie Apocalypse. They just put out a record, so I'm sure he'll come back and give us another Shai Hulud record here eventually. They still tour. They're still killing it.
Yeah, totally. It's so funny too how long they toured on records that were like 5-6 years old.
Yeah,
didn't matter. I mean, I'd go if somebody's like, "Hey, dude, Shai Hulud's coming to town next week. Tickets are $175." I'd sell my MacBook and I'd be like, "Hey, Joe, we're not going to do a podcast anymore." Like that. That's how strongly I feel about it.
Hey, Brian, you looking to pick up a new hosting gig on discussmetal.com?
Always.
Yeah.
That's how I got my current hosting gig.
Right. You're like, I just hung out long enough.
Kick the other guys out. No.
There you go. that's when we find out later on. It's like, yeah, Travis actually didn't want to quit the podcast. Brian forced him out.
He's dead.
It's like a,
No, I'm kidding.
But yeah, no, I think that Shai Hulud, I mean, there's almost nothing else to say about them. Like, they're a band. Like, if you like hardcore, like, and I wouldn't even say hardcore. If you like bands that have screaming vocals, listen to Shai Hulud. You're missing out if you've never heard this band or you don't understand like the type of impact they had. I mean, and whenever like to go back to the whole metalcore thing, right? Like when people say, "Oh yeah, they're a metalcore band," it is the purest representation of that idea of we're going to take metal and we're going to take hardcore and we're going to mix them together and it's going to be great and you're going to love it. There's nothing tropey about Shai Hulud. There's nothing cheesy. There's nothing preachy even. Like, you don't have to buy into a certain mindset to enjoy this band. You can just be yourself and enjoy what they have thrown down for us.
Yeah.
Bryan Patton, final thoughts on Shai Hulud.
I mean, their legacy from Hearts Want to Nourish stands on its own. They're a band that has stood over the years, and I think they're unrivaled.
Agreed.
I think Shai Hulud is a band that's not really relatable to anyone, but if you're a fan of hardcore, you should be listening to Shai Hulud.
I already basically gave my final thoughts, so that's fine.
Dan, what's your album of the week?
Dude, I mean, I'd be stupid if I didn't say that it was Circleback Terminus. That's my Get Stuff Done record, man. Like, my boss tells me to go do something, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to go do this. I put on Circleback, and I'm like, oh, look at that, it's already done. What do you guys think about that? Then my wife had a baby, and she didn't want to listen to Circleback on the way up to the hospital, so
probably not.
Yeah, I mean, so it's actually kind of funny. So we had a doula with us this time, which is the first time we've done that, and probably the last time because like we're definitely not having any more kids. But what was funny is, so we were talking, like my wife was in horrible pain, and I'm sorry about that, but like, I was like, dude, if guys had babies, like how different the environment would be. So like my wife is in a birthing center. Because like my wife, she's had all of our kids like natural birth, so like no anesthesia, no drugs, nothing like that, and just comes in, has the kid in a really nice like hotel suite, sort of thing, and it's so funny because like the environment that they create, like the lighting and the way it all is, I was like, dude, if guys had babies, like it would be totally different, like how painful the experience was. And the doula, she was all like, yeah, so like for you to be more comfortable, it'd have to be like you're like Meshuggah or something, like the whole time you're giving birth, whatever. And I was like, yes, that is exactly the way it would be. Like, no doubt. Like if I'm listening to like Circleback, I'm having that kid in 12 minutes. Like it's gonna happen.
You're missing out on the perfect birthing song, "Dig" by Mudvayne.
Right, yeah, like just these like loud, just insane, like, and I'd be like hardcore screaming to all the music, like the whole time, and that it just blows my mind, like, yeah, because like I associate like toughness with hardcore and metal and like all that stuff or whatever, and so it's so funny to watch, women have babies where they're like technically like in a certain sense way tougher than like I would ever be.
Oh, yeah.
Like 10 minutes into that process, I'd have been like, yeah, so you guys got into those drugs. I mean, I know I said I didn't want them, but like they definitely sound like a great idea right now. Like I get it, and like that's just, so I'm just gonna say it on this podcast that my wife is like way more hardcore than I am. That she's willing to put up with all that, just to hold a baby that like. A baby that's not even going to be like necessarily happy until they're like a year old.
Brian, what's your album of the week?
So listen to Circleback.
My album of the week is Nest by Brutus. I've been obsessed with that record for months now, and yeah, can't get enough of it.
I need to listen to it. It's that like it gets recommended to me all the time.
It's really fucking good.
And I never I never just click the button because I do this show and I'm like, well, these Shai Hulud albums aren't going to listen to themselves. So, this week it was okay, but like weeks when we did bands like Stained, no, it's not okay.
If Shai Hulud is one of the greatest hardcore bands of all time, I was having a conversation this week about who would be the greatest person or band to see live if you only had one. Who is the one person or the one band that would actually appeal to everyone in the room? And after thinking about it, I decided the answer to the question was Alice Cooper. So my album of the week is Alice Cooper. Trash.
I wouldn't like it though. If I was in the room, I'd be like, turn that off.
You would be in the minority.
Put in some circle back.
Let's get some shit done.
You better believe too, I'm like 10 seconds away from ordering the tape.
I did.
Terminus.
There's no need for the cassette.
No,
Yes, there
dude,
is.
I built a straight up stack, like a music stack. So I've got like on the bottom, I've got a mixer, and then on top of that, I've got my 5-disc CD changer. On top of that, I have my cassette deck, and on top of that, I have my turntable. So like, dude, let's go. Let's put that circle back cassette in. I'm probably, just in case John's listening, I'm gonna get the tape and the vinyl. Not very often I like a record that much, but that one definitely ignited a fire in me that I was like, man, I didn't even know I still liked this kind of hardcore, but like I do. I'm sold out. Like, and I got to give Bryan credit. I probably wouldn't have checked it out as quickly as I did had I not heard that interview.
That is why I do the podcast.
Because I'm great. I mean, I'm good friends with like with Josh and Danny from Not Beneath, and they've been telling me like, dude, seriously though, Not Beneath's cool, but check out Circle Back, and I'm like, yeah, I'll get to it. And then you like by the time I heard that interview, I was like, oh man, and Terminus is out, so like I actually, not gonna lie, I turned the podcast off about halfway through, and then I went to Terminus, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then I was like, I need to reach out to John like right now. So yeah, like I don't want this episode to just be a giant advertisement for Circle Back, but like seriously, guys, if you like hardcore, like it's awesome. Be like, hey John, can I get my $100 now? Ooh, are we done?
Bryan, thanks for hanging out with us. You know we miss you when you're not around.
Always.
You do. I talk to that dude on Messenger like every day. I'm like,
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
I'm like, did you hear the? Yeah, I was like, did you hear the? If you guys have ever been listening to this show and wondering why have they not talked about this band or that band, why haven't they done it? And the answer is this: we're assholes, so we don't always do it, but we will. Eventually, we'll get to everybody. If you want to reach out to us, you can reach out to us several different ways. You can send us an email at danandjoeshow@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook under facebook.com/discography discussion. You can find us on Twitter at discussmetal. And you can actually reach out to us on Discord. We have a Discord server that is pumping right now. If you want to join the discussion on Discord, you can click on the link that's provided in the show notes, and that will take you to our Discord service where you can talk to us in real time. We'll get to your favorite band. Can't guarantee we're going to like it, but we'll get to it.
And on that note, this has been episode 135 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks. Bryan Patton and As the Story Grows can be found on Facebook and Twitter, and at asthestorygrows.com.
It's official now.
And Instagram.
And Instagram.
We're on the Instagram. We're on the gram.
I need to like go on there and like do some actual stuff. Just like I get messages all the time that's like so and so's following you on Instagram, and I'm like, oh, that's a thing. I should probably do something about that.